Okay, she's logging in now.
Okay. I was having WebEx issues earlier today. I at least did get those sorted out.
Yes. WebEx do be stubborn sometimes.
Well, apparently, if you have a password, then it will also ask you to do a CAPTCHA along with
What?
the password. Yes, I am serious. And
Oh
it
my God.
was a whole thing for me this morning.
All right, that's a bit much. All right, I've got my committee members here, so let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. So welcome everybody. My name is Juan Marcano, and I represent Ward 4 on council, and I have the pleasure of being chair of the TAPS Policy Committee. And with me, I have my vice chair, Councilmember Coombs.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Whatever time it is. And Councilmember Murillo, who's our member.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes from September 22nd? I'm seeing heads nodding. Are there any changes or revisions?
Not from me.
Councilmember Marcano, I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm gonna abstain.
All right, works for me. Cool. So if we can just get the minutes sent over, I will get them signed and turned around as quickly as I can. I don't see any items on the consent calendar here, so we'll move into general business. So first up is 4A, a briefing from the Colorado Energy Office on statewide e-bike initiatives. Very excited about this. It looks like we have Sarah Thorne will be speaking on this. So Sarah, you've got the floor.
And council member, I'll go ahead and key Sarah off.
My apologies, Tom. Yes.
My name is Tom Worker Braddock. I'm a senior transportation planner here at the city. Staff was asked by council members to explore current and pending e-bike grant opportunities offered by the Colorado Energy Office. This is in light of regional jurisdictions offering e-bike rebate programs. So Sarah Thorne, senior program manager with the Colorado Energy Office, has graciously offered to provide an overview of what that office is doing with upcoming e-bike grant opportunities, and I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, is that up? Can everyone see it? Okay. I don't use PowerPoint often. We use the Google family at the state, so just want to make sure it was working all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Thorne with the Colorado Energy Office. I'm a senior program manager on the transportation team, and I manage a bunch of different programs for the state, but one of them is all of our e-bike programming, and we have a bunch of new exciting programs coming up this year. So we have three big main e-bike programs coming up. One is going to be a statewide e-bike rebate. Our second program is the Can Do Colorado program, which we're calling the full service program. And then we'll be having an e-cargo bike commercial delivery program. So I'm going to go into each one of these individually. So our statewide e-bike rebate program is targeted for low and moderate income individuals. This program was funded out of a bill this past legislative session, SB 22-193, that allocated $12 million for e-bike programming, and $10 million of that 12 is for e-bike rebates. We've been kind of debating about what this program will look like. The legislation's not very specific and kind of leaves a lot of the details up to our office. So we're, in thinking about it, have sort of been planning on making it very similar in format to how the City and County of Denver's e-bike rebate program is set up. So primarily this will be a point of sale rebate. We went with this option instead of kind of a post-sale rebate, which is what a lot of other communities around the United States have been doing, partially because we wanted to reduce the price of an e-bike at purchase so that we felt more people would be able to take advantage of this program if we did it that way. So to run the program, we'll be hiring a third-party administrator to kind of process rebate applications. We're a little behind in getting that RFP out. We were hoping it would be no later than the end of this week, but I think it's going to be the end of next week. And the hope is that it'll be launched to Coloradans kind of starting in March 2023. We have some idea of what the incentive levels will be and what the eligibility requirements are, but we're still kind of trying to decide what the best use of our funding is for this. So we basically need to decide how much is the rebate going to be for, and if there's going to be different incentives for low income versus moderate income, and then who qualifies for low and moderate income. We had been leaning towards low income as defined as 60% of the area median income and moderate income as 80% AMI. In recent weeks, and with some buy-in from the governor, we're thinking maybe rethinking that a little bit. So hopefully later this fall, we'll have some more information on what those incentives and eligibility requirements will look like. Then we'll also have, so we have the Can Do Colorado e-bike pilot program, which we're currently running. We launched it last year. We gave out grants to 5 different communities. So there's a program in Durango, Fort Collins, Boulder, Pueblo County, and then sort of the North Denver metro area. These programs gave out about 156 bikes to low-income essential workers, plus bike locks, panniers, helmets, and provided trainings on road safety, bike security, those kinds of things. And then all of the participants were asked to log trip data that can be found online on the dashboard. The website is right there, so you're welcome to peruse that at your leisure. I find it very fascinating, but it shows kind of the emissions that were avoided by riding their e-bikes versus driving and that kind of stuff. So it's been a great program, and we are using the pilot to inform our full service program. So this is that other $2 million from the SB 22-193. We're going to be launching the full service e-bike program, basically a continuation of our pilot. So this program is specifically available to local governments, nonprofits, community-based organizations, and tribal governments. Whereas in the pilot, it was for essential workers. This one is not necessarily it can just be for low income. I will be asking in the RFA that goes out that anyone that applies kind of has a targeted population in mind, just because those were our more successful pilot programs when they thought a little bit more about who would be getting bikes and whatnot. So for that program, we'll have about $1 million in funding for this fiscal year, and then about $1 million in funding for FY24. Also, once again, we're a little behind on procurement, so I think that's going to be more like mid-November for this one. All of our procurement documents from the pilot are on our website, so this one will be pretty similar. If anybody's interested in kind of getting a head start, you can kind of look to those to get a better idea of what that program will look like. And then lastly, we'll be having an e-cargo bike commercial delivery pilot. So this one has not been really fleshed out yet. Likely procurement in the winter, not really any real program design yet. And this is funded through our community access enterprise. The community access enterprise is funded through a retail delivery fee. You might have seen it on one of the many deliveries you've received since July 1st. So 6 and 9/10 cents comes through the community access enterprise, and that will be funding this pilot program. We're kind of looking at whether we want to have programs where there's like a fleet of cargo bikes available for, you know, DoorDash or Uber Eats drivers, that kind of thing, or whether it will be focused on working with local businesses for deliveries. I'm kind of open to all of the above since it's a pilot and just kind of see what works. But that program's coming. It's pretty small. We only have about 240,000 in available funding for the pilot, but hopefully we'll learn quite a few lessons and then we'll have more money available in the following fiscal year. So those are our 3 e-bike programs that we're doing at the state level. A lot of money coming for those, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you for that quick overview, Sarah. I do have some questions, but I will defer to my colleagues first. So Councilmember Coombs.
Sure. So I am assuming this is all kind of still in development, but I'm wondering for the program for local governments, what are kind of the requirements and guidelines you mentioned? Ownership, targeting the population, and having low income or having income requirements on the program. So are there any other requirements in terms of kind of the administration of the program from within the city, and then locations where the bikes would be procured by individuals? Like, what are kind of some of the nuts and bolts of how to run this type of a program?
Yeah, so the way most of our pilots did it was they worked directly with a bike shop in their community and purchased e-bikes through that bike shop, and then the program manager just essentially they screened for applicants and then handed out the bikes directly from their office rather than through the bike shop. They also kind of made sure to include training time and kind of, some fun events to encourage people to ride their e-bikes. I will say one thing we did learn out of the pilot was there was a little bit more admin time than kind of anticipated. I think for a few of our projects, they thought, oh, we'll hand out the e-bikes and then that's kind of it. And it really has turned out to be a little bit more collaborative between the participants in the program. There's been a little bit more hand-holding involved. Some people have had their e-bikes stolen over the course of the program, so kind of dealing with how do we keep that person participating. So just general questions like that keep coming in. So there's definitely still admin time to be considered throughout the project life cycle.
Great. And then are there, do you all have a list of kind of metro region organizations, like nonprofit organizations, that might be interested in collaborating on this type of program?
I do not, but we are partnering with Bicycle Colorado. They're a local bike advocacy group, and they'll be available for technical assistance. So as we kind of get started on our application process, they'll be there to answer questions and kind of help point whoever's interested in applying to those types of organizations.
All right. And then finally, what kind of a local kind of match or contribution is expected in order to be able to successfully engage in one of these programs?
Yeah, so we will be asking for a small match, not really a defined amount. For a couple of our pilots, that has just been some staff time in lieu of. So that could be one easy way to meet that requirement.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Coombs. Councilmember Murillo.
I don't have any questions, but I'm excited to hear that last bit of staff time in lieu of, and really just generally excited for all of the programmatic options. So thanks for your presentation.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. And Sarah, so my questions for you are a little more longer term, I think, here. So what do you see as some of the challenges for widespread adoption by the general population?
For just e-bikes in general?
For e-bikes in general, yeah.
I mean, I think cost is definitely the biggest challenge that's kind of what we're trying to hope to address through this rebate program, but it's a single funding stream. So we're kind of looking also at ways that we can continue this program after that funding runs out. And then I
Okay.
think also bicycle infrastructure is going to be a continuing issue, maybe not so much in the metro area, but in a lot of our more rural areas in the state, I think that will continue to be a challenge as well.
And is bicycle infrastructure something that you're going to be utilizing to evaluate, jurisdictions that might be interested in participating?
No.
No. Okay. All right. And do you see the potential for long-term transportation method behavioral changes, I guess, with this, or is that something you've already seen over time? Because I know we're not the first region to start, pushing a pilot like this. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say like just from our pilot alone, we've been running it now just about a year. And just from the data we've collected, there's been a definite shift in people using their e-bike over car travel. It's only 156 bikes, so it's not a huge sample set, but I would say consistently, even over the winter, all of our participants have been using their e-bikes, and they've mentioned how coworkers of theirs that see them, roll into work on their e-bike have also kind of started exploring how to finance their own e-bike, and a few of them have found a way to do that. And so, just that ripple effect is starting to happen, which I think is pretty exciting.
Good. Positive peer pressure. I dig it. Okay. And you mentioned infrastructure. So part of the, I guess, concern that I have in Aurora, because I love the idea of, what we all are doing with the pilot, but a lot of our bike infrastructure consists mostly of sharrows. We have very few like protected bike lanes. So I'm glad to hear that that's not necessarily a concern for participation in the program. But you mentioned that there's 10 million that's being utilized specifically for rebates for e-bikes. What's that additional 2 million in the program being utilized for?
That's for the full service e-bike program that
Okay.
chip.
All right. I missed that then. All right. Well, those were all of my questions. So I'm pretty excited about this. So thank you so much for providing us with this update.
Yeah, of course. And feel free to reach out if you guys have any additional questions.
All right. Will do. Thanks again. Okay. Moving on in the agenda here, we're at item 4B, a resolution for the intergovernmental agreement between the city and CDOT for funding of the Aerotropolis and I-70 corridor TDM program development and implementation project. And I believe, Tom, you're on deck for this one as well.
Having to figure out how to make all the buttons work.
Well, we can see the presentation and now we can hear you, so we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Again, my name is Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner here in the city, and this is along sort of the same vein as what we were just talking about. As city staff, we often seek various opportunities to fund important transportation improvement projects and studies throughout the city. In 2021, we submitted an application for our Dr. Cog Transportation Demand Management Set-Aside Grant to develop a TDM program for the rapidly growing Aerotropolis and I-70 corridor area. We were awarded that grant, and now we have to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation to initiate the project. Today, I'll go over why we submitted a grant for our transportation demand management project in this area and ask the committee to send this IGA to study session for the full council to consider. First off, transportation demand management is the encouragement of travel behavior that makes more efficient use of the transportation network. Put another way, TDM encourages people to travel using modes and times of days where the transportation system has more capacity. This can be beneficial to employees by giving them more options and choices in how to get to work, and beneficial to employers by having more reliable employee attendance, and in some ways, increasing the pool from which to draw potential employees. This project really initiated from conversations council members and staff had in late 2019 with business stakeholders from Amazon and other companies in the I-70's logistics and distribution center to discuss employee transportation needs. I'll go over that more in the next slide, but generally we found high demand from employees in that area for alternative commuting options. In addition, as part of the development pressure and pending I-70 interchange at what used to be called Harvest Road and is now referred to as Aerotropolis Parkway, CDOT is requiring the rollout of a separate TDM program funded by ARDA. With that pending TDM program and the demand for better transportation options in the I-70 logistics and distribution area to the west, the city decided to apply for the grant that we're discussing today. As part of the initial outreach in 2019 and 2020, city staff worked with Dr. Cog to administer a survey in the I-70 logistics area. To orientate you on the map, the road running east-west through generally the middle of the slide is Smith Road. On the west or the left side of the map is the 40th and Airport Station, and the eastern side is E470. There were over 270 survey responses, and the survey showed that more than 60% of employees wouldn't be able to afford a car repair. 40% of employees are interested in better transit service, and more than 60% of employees have household incomes of less than $46,000, $46,500. This is all indicative of a need for greater transportation options in this area. So the city will be working with Northeast Transportation Connections, also known as NETC, on this project. It's a nonprofit organization with an emphasis on travel demand management that currently serves North Central Denver and a small portion of Aurora. Project will work with area businesses and agencies including ARDA, CDOT, RTD, Dr. Cog, and Adams and Arapahoe counties to develop a TDM program for the area. This includes defining an organizational structure, working with stakeholders to identify program goals, objectives, and plans, and implementing the near-term strategies. Here's an overview of the tasks. TDM projects are primarily relationship-driven, and this project will be focused on working with businesses, employees, and agencies on determining a structure to work together in a long-term sustainable manner, and then implementing those near-term strategies that can deliver transportation choices to users in the near term. As part of this, the project will also be evaluating that program implementation to determine the success of those near-term strategies. And this is the area that the TDM will be focused on. It's generally between Peoria Street on the west, Monaghan on the east, and north of 6th Avenue. This is a $130,000 project with Aurora providing 15% as local match, or approximately $20,000, and it will be approximately 2 years from the start of the contract. With that, the question for the committee is, do you support moving this IGA between the city and CDOT to study session for consideration?
All right. Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. Councilmember Coombs, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest questions around this are the accessibility of transit options beyond the light rail. Right, there is light rail, but then how do people connect from light rail to these other facilities? It's a big issue that I've had many conversations about in looking at the logistics development in that area. So are there any what are the conversations rather that are being had around how to augment that light rail infrastructure to increase access through other modes from light rail to the area?
Excellent question. As part of that 2019 and 2020 conversation, we did have extensive discussions with RTD about the need to expand, some sort of transit service out here, whether that is extending existing transit routes or providing some sort of flex route service. As we all know, RTD has been very stressed lately, both by budgetary constraints, but then more so simply by the limited availability of drivers to provide that service. So RTD basically told us that at that time we were discussing with them, and I can't imagine it's changed since then, they would be unable to expand, any type of flex ride service out to this area to directly serve these businesses. And so that's where a TDM makes sense, where that provides the type of organizational structure where if businesses got together, set up a transportation management association, each business could write a check to that transportation management association, and then the TMA could go out and hire a private shuttle to provide or to expand transit connections between those businesses and light rail. A business operating by itself, trying to do that by itself, it would be very challenging and cost prohibitive. And also, it's not always easy for businesses to work directly one-on-one with each other. And that's where this TMA really presents additional options for how to address that challenge.
All
That
right.
is my
Any
only
other-
question.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. Councilmember Murillo.
No questions.
All right. And I don't have any questions either, Tom, but thank you for the presentation. And the question for the committee now is, do we want to move this forward? I strongly support doing so.
Yes.
Yes, I support.
All right, great. So it's unanimous and it will move forward to study session. Thank you so much, Tom, for the presentation again. All right. Moving on to item 4C, Arapahoe County Transit and Micromobility Study. It looks like we've got Matt Callison kicking us off here. So Matt, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Chair Marcano. Appreciate it. Good to be here. Matt Callison, Transportation Planning Supervisor, City of Aurora. This, as you recall, Chair Marcano, was brought to the Executive Committee of the Arapahoe Transportation Forum in the May-June timeframe last year. And Tom is going to bring up the slide deck. Thank you, Tom, on that. And as that is being queued up, this represents an application. We have the agenda commentary on PDF page 72 of your agenda packet. And thank you, Tom. And moving forward with that, this represents a project that Arapahoe County was the applicant and was successful in being awarded funds, approximately $1.4 million out of the call 2. The board approved the call 1 and 2 and finalized those, next slide please, into the DRCOG tip in the middle of September 21st actually, on that. So moving forward, the overall study is focused on urban areas throughout the county. So we have 7 jurisdictions and 6 jurisdictions and a TMA being represented as participants in this. Again, focus on commuting trips in the urban area with particular interest in identifying origin destination travel patterns, levels of existing family of transit services being provided, and then reaching out with a robust public outreach and engagement process, and moving forward, documenting from existing conditions, outreach, recommendations, and also of particular note, this effort includes a pilot project. About 50% of the funds are directed to support a pilot project to be deployed on that. So we think this will be actually render some important findings and information as we move forward in better identifying and providing transit services for our constituents on that. In addition to that, the sub-regional service councils, which were a recommendation out of the RTD Accountability Committee that Council Member Murillo was a co-chair on, are also being activated and with a first meeting in the November timeframe on that. So we'll have city staff representation on that. as well as the input from this study effort to feed into that dialogue with RTD in terms of how to better identify existing improvement areas, needs, and imminent near-term and mid-term future needs moving forward with that. I might also add the recommendations will be tiered in 3 levels. Midterm, 1 to 5 years, or 5 to 10 years. Near term is 1 to 5, and long term 10 to 20 year time frame on that. We'll address things such as first and final mile connections, mobility hub applicability, and the like on that. So the next slide, we have the 7 participating jurisdictions, including the Denver South Transportation Management Association. And then the following slide really lays out the overall funding participation ask, if you will, on the local match. Again, approximately $1.4 million in total funding. It's a 90-10 federal local split on that. And there was discussion and general agreement to look at this in terms of a proportionate local match to the jurisdictions, allocated to the jurisdictions and the TMA based on population and employment on that. So the request of this committee is for support of the $40,000 as our proportional match moving forward on that. And we are certainly available for questions and discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mac, for the presentation. Councilmember Coombs, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, so just as we're looking at these different local match components to DRCOG TIP projects, I know we were just looking at applying for DOLA funds for local match for different transportation projects. Would that apply to these kind of DRCOG TIP study type matches, or is it specifically for building projects that the DOLA funding will apply?
Right. Councilmember Coombs, appreciate the question. The Department of Local Affairs, the DOLA funds, are being currently poised and queued for supporting our, in anticipation to support the city's local match for our station enhancements on the BRT for the Colfax corridor on that. The DOLA funds represent an opportunity of using state dollars to support an amount, not the total, typically the total local amount, but an amount for local jurisdictions to place before the project recommendation or project application to either TIP funds or in this case for the BRT case, it would be to represent our local match for the TIP construction or for the BRT construction for Colfax represents about $12 to $13 million. So that FTA to local jurisdiction match is 5149 respectively. So the $1 million that we are compiling an application for now, and I see Christina is in the room, would be to represent to cover a portion of our $12 million local match responsibility on that. So,
Mac, can I help respond as well? So, Councilmember Coombs, the DOLA funding has been put out for matching opportunity to support the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act opportunities. Specifically. Now, there is 80 million approved by the state legislature, and our understanding is some of that did flow to state agencies as well. How the funding flow fit in with DRCOG, and I'm not
clear on that. We can get an answer for you on that. But our understanding is that the matching funds are available for infrastructure bill grant opportunities.
Okay, great. So in these instances, everything that we're forwarding, we will be looking to actually provide that local match as the city.
From the city, correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Murillo.
No questions, but I support moving forward.
Great. I do have a question regarding the public outreach strategies for this study. Can we talk a little more about, I guess, well, the strategy to make sure that we get, substantial public engagement on this?
Right. We are in the process in Arapahoe County as being the project manager in terms of developing the overall scope for that RFP.
Okay.
Chair Marcano on that. So we are certainly available to discuss what your focus and interests are and provide that input back as that final scope for the RFP is being drafted prior to being advertised on that.
I mean, just my 2 cents off the top of my head here. What we did for the 13th Avenue, community engagement component, I thought was really great. Granted, the scope of this study is different than just, specific corridor. But the fact that I think we went door to door, and actually met people where they were at, I think that was really important. So if we're able to ensure that, some kind of community canvassing, I think is part of the overall strategy for the study, we'd be on the right path there to get some genuine input.
Okay, thank you for that. And we're thinking, since this is countywide with an emphasis on the urban areas, it is more than likely a blend of techniques and methods of reaching out and securing engagement with the community.
Certainly. I just wanted to make sure that, the latter that we just talked about there was a part of that overall.
Okay, appreciate that.
So, yep, thank you. All right. So with that, the question is, do we support this moving forward? I am in support. I believe Councilor Murillo said she was as well.
And yes, from me as well.
And from Alice too, it sounds like. All right, so it will move forward. Thank you, Mac, for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 4D, strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation grant application. So this will be Carly. So Carly, you've got the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Marcano. Victor Rochelle here. Unfortunately, Carly had a conflict and couldn't be here today, so I'll be covering this item.
All right.
All right, and hopefully my screen's up.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Good afternoon. Victor Rochelle, Deputy Director of Public Works. Today, we're going to be talking about the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, also known as the SMART Grant application opportunity. So a couple things about the SMART grant. It is a US DOT grant that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, over $100 million over the next 5 years. And it's really primarily for technology projects related to connected vehicles, traffic signals, things of that nature. The application deadline is coming up very fast. And we are actively looking at this and excited to put in an application. And of course, the goal here is to solve real world challenges with technology. One of the challenges that we have here at the city, our signal system is all connected via wireless, which works great in flat environments with no trees or anything. We have a little bit of topography here in Aurora. So bandwidth can be a challenge, and fiber can not only solve that challenge, but provide additional opportunities for the city. A little bit about our application. We do and would like to apply for a Stage 1 planning and prototyping grant. The interesting thing about this grant is that if you do not apply for Stage 1, then you can't apply for Stage 2. So our goal here is to get Stage 1 done and then follow this up in the future with a Stage 2 following a successful application here. What our plan will include, as I touched on, signal connectivity, aka fiber. That fiber can do many things for us. Connect the signals supports connected vehicle, that's vehicle to infrastructure, and then the reverse, infrastructure to vehicle. Also, transit signal priority with a lot of our rail crossings. It will allow us to pull down traffic signal performance measures and metrics much more quickly and effectively. And then it also supports a active traffic management program and center, which is something that we're also hoping to advance here in the near future. And then last, the fiber and this application would also allow us to pursue other smart city applications down the road. Right now, we don't have that bandwidth. This grant and fiber would provide that opportunity. One last thing that I kind of missed there at the top of the slide, going back to some comments on earlier presentations on grants, there's no local match requirement for this grant. So we will not be necessarily looking for funds from Aurora to match on this, which is a big plus.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just a real quick summary. I'm available for any questions. And then I have the question for the committee up if you guys support us pursuing this application.
All right. Thank you for the presentation, Victor. And I'm really excited to see this coming through. This is one of the better parts, I think, of that Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. This is something that I've been really interested in, gosh, since before I ran for office. So very, very excited to see funding coming from the feds to, improve our traffic management systems and actually help us build out that infrastructure that we really need. So with that, Councilmember Coombs.
I do not have any questions, but I definitely support this, and I am also very excited.
Councilmember Murillo.
No questions, and I support moving forward.
All right, awesome. So we'll move forward to study session. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
All right, item 4E, alternative fuels corridor nomination process. And it looks like, Victor, you're back up for this one. And I think we'll have Mike King from CDOT as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Marcano. So yeah, Victor Rochelle again here, and just a quick introduction. So this presentation, CDOT's here, Mike King, and the goal of this discussion is we were researching grant opportunities, and Mike's going to cover one of those, the National Electric Vehicle Grant. Interestingly, in order for projects to qualify for that grant, one thing that helps, I believe, in the scoring is having a designated alternate fuel corridor. Now, this isn't just electric vehicles, this is hydrogen, other methods as well, including electric vehicles. So the City of Aurora and AEDC have been contacted by several private entities that are interested in projects that could apply for these grants, but we do not have an alternative fuel corridor designated. And so one of the questions here at the end, we'll be talking about 225 as a potential alternative fuel corridor. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. King from CDOT.
Thank you, Victor. And I will just share my screen here, and give me 1 second, please. All right, please let me know if you're not able to see that.
Looks good.
And thank you. So yes, I am Michael King. I work with the Colorado Department of Transportation here in our Office of Innovative Mobility. And one of the things that we work on here at CDOT is transportation electrification. Today, I'm going to be talking, as Victor said, about the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. That's our acronym du jour that you'll be hearing me say here. And some of the new opportunities that grant program presents, as well as a little bit about the process for how communities can engage with it moving forward. So first, just a little bit of level setting, which helps in these conversations. For those of you that are not already familiar, there are different levels of electric vehicle charging that we talk about. Level 1 is a regular plug that you would see anywhere in a regular house or building, and many people don't realize that EVs can charge on those plugs, albeit rather slowly. The most common type of charging that you've probably seen around your community or around the state is level 2 charging. These are often at apartment buildings, public buildings, workplaces. And these are good for charging over the course of a workday or overnight, 6 to 8 hours to charge a vehicle from nearly empty to nearly full. So very convenient on a day-to-day basis, but not a good fit for longer travel or when you need a quick top off. And then of course, third on here and circled at the bottom are what we call level 3 or DC fast charging. These are the types of chargers that are the closest equivalent to a gas station experience, albeit still 20 to 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the vehicle to charge up. And these are really important for that longer distance travel across a region, across a country. The reason that these are highlighted in this slide is because the NEVI program focuses almost exclusively on DC fast charging. But as I will mention, the state of Colorado has grant programs for all the other types of charging as well. So we'll be talking NEVI today, but if you're interested in level 2 or level 1, there are other funding options out there. This map gives you an indication of the current landscape in Colorado in terms of DC fast charging. You can see that we do actually have quite a bit of DC fast charging already in the state compared to a lot of other parts of the country. The green squares are the ones that are live and active, and then the red dots are 9, actually this says 11 because the map's a little bit older, but these are part of a program that is currently being funded by the Colorado Energy Office. And actually, since this map was created, I know that the station in Ouray there has come online. So we're continuing to build out this network. You can see the outlines of a statewide sort of skeleton of charging that's starting here, and you're starting to see the ability to travel to and from any part of the state with confidence, but there's a lot left to go. And the NEVI program with this new federal funding will give us a new tool to make that happen. So, NEVI itself, as was previously mentioned, part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in some places. This is $5 billion across the country available for DC fast charging installation. In Colorado, our portion of that formula is $57 million, and you can see that our first year allocation is 8.3. I do note that there's another $2.5 billion in funding that will be a discretionary or competitive grant program that will be coming from the federal government. We're hoping later this year, perhaps early 2023. That program is interesting because it's a little bit more flexible in terms of the types of fuel as well as the location, the geography. But we don't have a lot of details on that right now. So today I'll be focused on the NEVI program, which is narrowly focused on fast charging, and as Victor mentioned, is tied geographically to those designated corridors. In terms of the process, every state was required to develop and submit a plan for the NEVI program to the federal authorities for their review. Colorado did that by August 1st, which was our deadline, and we received well, I should say that this slide says that the feedback was due September 30th. That's true. We did receive approval on September 14th. So Colorado is ready to spend that funding. And I can tell you actually that all 50 states plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico successfully submitted their plans. So every part of the country is participating in this program. So a few key things about the NEVI program. As we've already talked about, projects are eligible within 1 mile of a federally designated electric vehicle corridor, and I will show you where those corridors are in Colorado in a minute. There is a general prioritization across the program because it is a national program to electrify rural areas, disproportionately impacted communities, and also those areas where there is a potential for future freight and goods movement. Because right now, most of the electric vehicles that we see and most of the charging that we see is really targeted at the light duty passenger market. And while there is a lot of progress happening there, we're also trying to lay the groundwork for more use of delivery vehicles, shipping, and freight, because those vehicles do have an outsized impact on air quality and climate change. And so we're trying to think beyond what is on the road today, but also to what will be out there in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years as well. There is a focus on DC fast charging locations, and there's a requirement that each site have at least 4 150 kilowatt chargers. If you're not familiar with that standard, 150 kilowatts is pretty far beyond the average charger that you would see out there today. So there is really an intention here to future-proof these investments so that as the vehicle technology improves, the charging is not obsolete, and also that there are at least 4 chargers at every site, so that when customers pull up, they are guaranteed that there's something available, that they have a good customer experience, and they're not waiting in long lines. So these are the currently designated corridors in the state of Colorado. We have 13 of them, which is actually more than a lot of states. We've been participating in this program for several years before there was any funding attached to it. And so we've tried to build out a network that represents every part of the state. You can see that the 3 primary interstates that crisscross 25, 70, and 76 have been designated. We also have a number of regional routes, and you can see some pretty good coverage on the southwest portions of the state. We've added more recently some of the Eastern Plains areas, and we're trying to give ourselves the maximum flexibility as to where to spend these investments. But we're not required to invest in every single corridor. It's just that this gives us more options for where we can support projects. This is a similar map. So we've got our designated corridors, and what this overlays are the currently NEVI compliant stations, the ones that already meet those new standards. Those are in the green squares. The yellow dots are current DC fast charging, but either based on the power level or the number of charging units, they do not yet meet the NEVI standard. So those are areas where we might be able to upgrade an existing facility as opposed to building something from scratch. And then you can see that the yellow corridors are the ones that, based on not having NEVI compliance, would be some of our priorities. And then the dotted red lines on those corridors are areas where there's currently no DC fast charging at all. So there's not going to be a strict prioritization of, these projects versus these. A lot of this will depend on the applications that we receive. But anytime that we have an opportunity to build charging in an area that doesn't already have it, that's going to be more attractive. If we have the ability to upgrade a site at lower cost than building something from scratch, that will be a value proposition. But any part of the state, any one of these corridors is eligible for NEVI funding. And particularly in the Denver metro area, based on the distance requirements and the NEVI requirements, a lot of that area is shown currently as green, implying that it doesn't need further investment. But of course, we have the most people in the Denver metro. We have many of the most disproportionately impacted communities. And so those will also remain priorities because we need more charging everywhere. This is a map that shows some of the same information. It just shows the interstates, but it also highlights the disproportionately impacted communities in the state. So this kind of highlights some of the opportunity areas where we can accomplish our goals of filling these geographic gaps, but also addressing disproportionately impacted communities. And of course, if you look at the inset, you can spot Aurora there and the passage of I-225, which would crisscross a number of those areas as well. And this is a similar map. This removes the interstates and puts the US highways on, showing a similar story that there are opportunities to accomplish multiple goals across the state, rural areas, disproportionately impacted communities, as well as areas of greater freight and delivery need in the future for those larger vehicles. Oops. So here I've provided a map just zooming in a little bit on Aurora itself. And talking about some of the corridor designation criteria. So if the city would like to seek a designation, if the state would like to put forward a designation on the city's behalf in the future, some of the things that we would be asked to show to our federal partners are, is this on the national highway system? Does this support regional or interstate travel? Does this route serve a disproportionately impacted or rural community? Is there potential for fast charging investment? And then which corridors, this is a question for the group, and I've heard some indication from staff ahead of time that 225 is on the short list, but what sort of routes are priorities for Aurora? And then the last thing I'll mention about this is that while there is a lot of focus on NEVI right now and the geographic implications of having designations, there are state grant programs for all types of charging from level 1 to level 3 in every part of the state of Colorado. that are available today and will continue to be in the future. So if there is a part of your community that is not within 1 mile of a designated corridor, that area is still eligible for a project through the Charge Ahead Colorado program. And in some ways that might even be preferable for certain projects because it avoids some of the federal requirements, which can be a bit more onerous for smaller projects. So lastly, I'll just mention the NEVI corridor designation process. This is something that's initiated by the federal office each year, typically in the February to March time period. CDOT staff work with communities and stakeholders to identify, are there specific corridors that are rising to the top for people? Then we submit a nomination packet, usually in the May or June time period, where we make the case as to why new corridors need this designation. And then FHWA responds to that usually in the summer time period. Once that designation is official, projects could begin to be funded there using the NEVI funds. But as I mentioned, and I like to underline this, any project in your community could apply today for Charge Ahead Colorado program. And that would be something to pursue in the meantime as we think about a future nomination or multiple nominations in your community. In terms of what we're doing with NEVI, we've been doing stakeholder engagement. We're currently working with the Colorado Energy Office to set up the specific grant program and all the criteria that will be in there. We're looking for a grant solicitation in the first quarter of 2023. And then we will be updating the NEVI plan on an annual basis moving forward. And of course, once we move into implementation and tracking and reporting the results of how those funds are being spent and how the projects are going. So this will be an ongoing program for at least 5 years. And we look forward to providing future updates and getting additional input from the city of Aurora and other stakeholders over that time. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, take comments, or clarify anything that I may have confused you on. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael, for the presentation. Councilmember Coombs, do you have any questions or comments?
Not at the moment. That was a lot of information, so I'm
Yeah.
just trying to process it. But thank you so much for being here and sharing.
My
All right,
pleasure.
Councilor Murillo.
Yes, hi, thank you for the presentation. Just a question, would Colfax be considered like an eligible roadway for something like this?
Yes, I believe that Colfax is part of the national highway system. It is US 40 in other parts of the state. And so designation for Colfax is certainly something that we could discuss.
Okay, I'm not really sure how to follow up on that discussion, or if that makes sense, maybe that's a conversation with staff or with you all. But I'd be open to exploring, if it's what that looks like for the Colfax corridor.
Yeah, so following up on Councilor Murillo's comment, I wanted to highlight that both Havana and Colfax are state highways, but they did not seem to be indicated on the Denver Metro snapshot there, although they are basically running through impacted communities in Aurora. So I would like to advocate for those corridors to be flagged either through this program or through Charge Ahead Colorado. Michael, you mentioned that it might be easier for some corridors to go through the Charge Ahead Colorado route. And I guess from your perspective, would those two corridors be better suited for that? Or should we also be looking for NEVI designation?
It really depends on the individual project. So having a NEVI designation would certainly not hurt in any case. And I'd be happy to work with the city staff or other stakeholders on talking through I-225, Havana, and Colfax for our next round, or any others that you suggest. In terms of individual projects, it really comes down to what is the location and what is the intended user. So if you're looking for charging that is at, say, an existing fueling station or a retail area where people are likely to stop off on their way to somewhere else and then continue, or an area where taxis and Ubers and Lyfts are dropping people off and picking people up, the DC fast charging, the 4 units at the high power 150 kilowatt, that makes a lot of sense in that context.
Mm.
If you're looking for something that is more aligned with where people work, multifamily housing where people are spending the night, or perhaps community areas like parks and recreational centers where people are spending more time, then a level 2 charger is a better fit for a lot of those people, those cases. It's more affordable and it's an easier project lift that doesn't have as many federal requirements. I don't know, I'm sure Tom would be aware if the city of Aurora has an EV readiness plan or some sort of infrastructure build out plan already developed. If so, that can be a really useful way to identify which funding source is the best fit for each particular project. And if you don't have a plan like that already, the Colorado Energy Office does have grants, and Xcel Energy has program support to help communities develop their own readiness plan. And then that can give you sort of a roadmap for what funds will we pursue and what order will we do this in.
Sure. Okay, that is very helpful context, and I would definitely support further discussion with staff. Just in Ward 4, for example, on Havana Street, which is Highway 30, we have the Gardens on Havana, which is a large shopping center where people spend, a fairly long amount of time. And I think that would be a really great candidate for one of those 150 kilowatt stations. I think the only rapid charging in this entire side of town is one of the car dealerships. I think it's the
Yes.
Nissan dealership on the Havana Motor Mile. So I think that the Havana Business Improvement District would be happy to be part of that conversation as well. Since this is something that would, I think draw more business towards them while also providing a very useful public service. So
Yes, and I mentioned several times in the presentation the Charge Ahead Colorado grant program. That
mhm.
program has calls for applications 3 times a year. And has been going for about 8 or 9 years at this point and will for the foreseeable future. There's currently a round open. So if there are folks in your community that are looking for charging funding in the near future, they could apply to that now. I'll be happy to drop a link into the chat for everyone. But
Please
it's
do.
also a sort of thing where if you're not ready to apply now, because it's a regular occurrence, you can have those conversations, make those plans, and develop applications for future rounds because you know that the funding will be there.
All right, great. Yeah, if you could drop a link to that into the chat, I'll send that over to the bid. And yeah, I'm sure that my colleagues have other groups that can loop into this conversation as well in their wards.
Chair Marcano,
Yes, ma'am.
just can I also flag for staff Highway 83, Parker Road?
Oh gosh,
Something to look at. Yep, no worries. You're good.
absolutely.
Noted. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm just really excited to see the state, rolling out more of this infrastructure. I think this is actually going to be a really huge boon for a lot of our rural communities as well. I was up in the mountains a couple of years ago with my EV, and I didn't buy one of the longer range models. And I'd had a little bit of the range anxiety coming back, but
Yeah.
also we drove by a bunch of little towns that had like restaurants and little museums that, if I weren't so nervous, it would have been interesting to stop at. But I feel like for those kinds of communities, having some of these high voltage chargers where folks are going to, come in, spend 30 minutes to an hour there, that's a great way to get folks in the door of those restaurants, into the little cities, museums, and generate some positive economic impact there while also improving or increasing the likelihood that folks are going to adopt EVs.
Yes,
So,
indeed. Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much again for the presentation.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on to 4F. This is going to be grant updates for Dr. Cog from fiscal year 2022 to 27, Transportation Improvement Program and Infrastructure Investment and Job Act discretionary grant programs. My gosh, that's a mouthful. And it looks like we have Victor as the initiator and speaker. So welcome back,
Thank
Victor.
you. Yep, thank you. One more time. Good evening again, Victor Rochelle, Deputy Director of Public Works. So we're happy to provide an update. We presented this previously. We're going to provide an update on our call 2 applications as well as call 3, and then moving forward. With that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Matt Callison.
Okay, thank you, Victor, for that. And if we forward to the next slide, Matt Callison, City Reward Transportation Planning Supervisor. On that, we are very enthused to provide the committee an update on where we are on this continuum of the transportation improvement program, as well as eminent federal infrastructure investment and Jobs Act discretionary grant opportunities as they're unfolding in current time and eminently in the future on that. So call 1 we've been through, that represented a regional project focus, approximately $40 million. The board approved those project recommendations, selected those projects out of total submittals back in May of this year, and they were emphasized and really solely directed and targeted for multimodal and transit projects on that. And that goes to the funding requirements of the programs associated with that. So moving forward, call 2 that was acted by the board on September 21st. Total 173 million total throughout the entire region, 8 forms. Adams and Arapahoe County had funding based again on proportional POP employment and vehicle miles traveled on that. Again, multimodal and transit projects moving forward on that. And we'll touch on those projects that the committee actually was briefed on several meetings ago relative to our success in garnering awards ultimately on that. Call 3, we're currently under call 3 in terms of processing. We submitted applications back a couple weeks ago on the 11th, and that expanded the available funds by a program category. So not only transit multimodal, but also what is termed as surface transportation block grants. Those funds are the most flexible in that they can fund multimodal transit, bike ped, as well as transportation operational improvements, bridge reconstruction, safety as well on that. So a lot of flexibility there moving forward on that. And then call 4, which will be poised to open on the 27th, 28th of November, that Monday after Thanksgiving, closes on the last week in January 27th, actually. Again, approximately 193 million. And in the 2 forums that Aurora participates in, the Adams Forum, approximately $30 million, Arapahoe County Forum, approximately $36 million available. And this is, again, a sub-regional that is open to multimodal, bridge safety, and operational street projects on that. So moving forward, let's jump into the 2022 through 2025 TIP program. On that. So we passed through project or call 1 that included approximately 6 projects. Those are the regional projects. The board passed that on the 18th of May and actually brought that into the current TIP. Our TIPs also run out to 2027, so there's a bit of an overlap in the programming of that. Next slide, please. On that. So those are the 6 projects of interest to us, and relevancy is obviously the Denver sponsored BRT on East Colfax on that. So that is particularly relevant and we're highly supportive of that moving forward. In this case, in call one, they requested approximately actually $18 million. They were awarded $15 million to support the NEPA and design of that project. As you can see, there are other projects, again, with a multimodal and transit component on that. BRT on State Highway 119, Boulder to Longmont, Corridor 7, Broomfield, as well as Arapahoe County, Santa Fe, multimodal improvements associated with the Santa Fe Corridor PEL, completed a number of years ago. So next slide, moving forward into call two as a wrap up. Again, opened in May, closed in the latter part of June, and was recently approved at last month's DRCOG board, moving forward on that. So we actually can appreciate the projects that were awarded out of that call to the multimodal transportation master plan, and that is programmed for starting actually fiscal year 23, which opened on October 1st. And we are developing a scope, reviewing that internally. That will feed into our request for proposals, project proposal team selection and recommendation for council's consideration in Q1 of 2023. So January, February, March timeframe. And then targeting that for notice to proceed on the top of April, So moving forward, Aurora multimodal access improvements, design and construction. Those are a cadre of projects focused, many of which on Havana Corridor. There's a project on Colfax, as well as a project on Yale Avenue on that. So those are moving forward, focused on sidewalk connections to bus stops and where there's clearly linkages that are not there today, to provide some value and benefit here. And then the Smith Road multimodal improvements, Peoria to Powhatan, that is a design project. Take it to 60% design, including the multimodal side path in that corridor. So key, as Tom had covered earlier, in providing our manufacturing, distribution, logistics center an opportunity for alternative modes and conveyance infrastructure to serve those employment centers moving forward on that. And then the next slide, please. So call three, we're currently in the process of moving forward. We touched a bit on overall projects that have been submitted. 19 in total were submitted on that, 13 in the surface transportation block grant category, and 6 in the air quality and multimodal category on that. Moving forward, the bit of an update in terms of public comment that just closed yesterday on that, and that will be advancing to the DRCOG scoring, which is complete. They score internally. DRCOG staff panel does that. Then they provide the scores, which are not binding. It's an informational, serves as an informational role and element in that. But there is a project review panel that is comprised of representatives from all the 8 forums, as well as representatives from Colorado Department of Transportation, the Regional Transportation District, air quality, and a TMO representative on that. So that panel is convening on Halloween on the 31st, next Monday, with the provisional meeting on November the 2nd, if needed. That review panel will ultimately make a recommendation And that recommendation will be in terms of which projects will be recommended for consideration by the DRCOG board for approval on November the 16th at their board meeting. Prior to that, that review assessment will be brought before the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting on the 14th, on Monday, and then the Regional Transportation Committee meeting, which meets the following Tuesday on the 15th. So all coming up very quickly on that and moving forward on that. With that, the next slide, please. The call 3 projects within our two forms, Arapahoe and Adams County, are presented there for informational purposes on that. And it's also in your packet on PDF page, starting with the item agenda commentary on page 101 of the PDF. So as you can see, the third project is the Peoria Bridge over Sand Creek replacement. That effort is to look at clearing it through the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and then bringing that through final design on that. Approximately 25 to 30% preliminary concept design has been completed by a consultant team that the city has coordinated with on that. But we want to bring that forward on that. And that represents about a $3 million effort. We provided pledged a 40% local match on that. And resulting federal request is $1.8 million on that. And with that, Victor's going to cover some of the specifics on the next two slides as that project is depicted. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mac. So just real quick overview of that application and what our goals are there. So that's the Peoria Bridge over Sand Creek. It's a critical piece of infrastructure. I will say the bridge is certainly coming of age, maybe even past age at this point, lacks adequate multimodal pedestrian connectivity. And also is a pinch point. If you've driven through the area, we have lane drops on both sides. You come through, you got the light rail going over, and then you've got a narrow bridge that doesn't accommodate pedestrians immediately adjacent to the Fitzsimmons campus, MLK. We got Peoria Crossing, Aurora Housing Authority development just to the north, as well as the trail going underneath. So this is a critical pinch point for the city. It's also been identified on the city's capital improvement master plan for quite some time. As a project that's always been pretty high up there on the needs list. So we feel like we've submitted a strong application, and we're excited to see the results of that here in the coming weeks. What I've got up on the screen, you can see kind of the surrounding areas of influence, proximity to light rail, as well as the other networks in the area. Again, with this serving not only traffic and vehicular transportation, but also the multimodal aspects that are missing and pinched down as a result of the age and inadequacy of the bridge. And then just real quick overview, the bridge was constructed in 1966. We're seeing volumes over 33,000, including freight, bikes, your typical cars, does cross that and have that trail corridor for the Sand Creek Regional Greenway. And it's been functionally obsolete as a 4-lane bridge for quite some time now. So we are concerned about it becoming structurally deficient, and it's got a pretty low rating. So the sooner we can get this thing fixed, not only from the structural aspect, but all the other needs was why it was identified and submitted as a grant application. So yeah, we're pretty excited to have that in the queue, and fingers crossed here, we're going to have some good news in the coming weeks. With that, Mac, I'll kick it back to you.
Right. Thank you, Victor, for that. Very highly competitive in the STP block grant, surface transportation block grant category, which this project is going after in terms of funding. There's $27.7 million. About $121 million in applications on that. So 13 total applications throughout the region competing for that 127 million on that. So we feel like we have a strong project. I'm sure all the other applications feel likewise on that. So as Victor said, we will be realizing the recommendations of the review panel very shortly and moving forward on that. I might also add, moving into call 4, this project will be highly competitive in call 4-2 if we need that as a contingency on that. Always looking to have a backup and a plan B moving forward as well on that. So moving forward on that, call 4 will start overall approximately 192 million on that. It's split about 55-45 in terms of STP and air quality multimodal on that. And again, these are proportional amounts. $30 million for Adams County rounded and $36 million for Arapahoe County rounded off, are based again on population, employment, and VMT as it relates to as a percent share throughout the entire region on that. 28th opening, closing the end of January on that, and it does go through a similar process of being scored with Dr. Cog's staff group, and then the review panel goes back to the form. I should say there is no review panel per se. The results of those scores go back and are ported to the individual forms, and then the individual forms, as we did in call 2, will make a project package recommendation, discuss and advance that to the executive committee. Chair Marcano participates on, and Council Member Lawson in the Adams County Transportation Forum, and then those will be ported to the Dr. Cog committees, Transportation Committee, Advisory Committee, the RTC, Regional Transportation Committee, as well as for the to the board for consideration in the March-April timeframe on that. Ultimately, these recommendations will require policy and program changes to the overall TIP, the 2024 through 2027 TIP, and that will all come together in the August timeframe coming up in 2023 on that. So, thank you. So let's look at where we're going for call 4, some additional opportunities as it relates to 13th Avenue. We feel that it's absolutely timely to look at NEPA clearance and final design, 60% design of the concepts developed in the 13th Avenue multimodal corridor study that will actually be coming for consideration to this committee in November is what we're eyeing on that. And then moving down Highline Canal, underpass of Colfax Avenue, just west of Airport Boulevard. That is a joint Arapahoe County project with our pros department participation on that. So again, that would be for design and construction consideration and call 4. We're looking, most recently, we had a meeting yesterday, in fact, on the Alameda Bridge over 225. That is identified on the regional transportation plan as a bridge replacement project. It's in the freight category on that, but obviously the bike ped facilities on that bridge need to be brought to proper current standards, as well as turn lanes and queuing issues that are there today and will continue to present themselves. So we're looking at identifying what that overall design and NEPA efforts will be in a call 4 recommendation package for the committee to consider And then multimodal access improvements, we talked about that before from call 2. Expanding that, the need is great and far-reaching on the Havana corridor, as well as in other corridors throughout the city on that. So that's something we're eyeing, and we've never taken our eye off of the need for Gun Club Road, that section between Quincy and Aurora Parkway. On that. So we continue to look in-house to what's the best path forward from a cost and risk perspective, and the ability to advance that project. Is it a local project? Do we federalize it? Or there are other approaches moving forward on that? Thank you, Victor. And then moving forward, we continue to look at Montview and gather some of the key considerations in addressing that through NEPA, and what are the costs and risks involved with that. We've talked about Alameda Bridge over 225. So think of these as additional backups, if you will, and funding sources on the discretionary side of USDOT's program on that. Chambers Road, grade separation over the UP and the RTD A line, and Smith Road. We think that is appropriately could be appropriately matched for infra grant on that, because it's dealing with freight movements, railroad crossing risks, etc. on that, particularly with the Magellan terminal in close proximity, and the materials that are transported across those tracks, and the elevated exposure with the mainline UP and the A line on that. And then we actually talked about the SMART program that was released, and the first funding availability Victor covered earlier in the agenda on that. So moving forward, some additional items relative to American Disability Act transition plan related to sidewalk improvements, ramps, those types of features. Seems to be active transportation investment program may offer some opportunity. We covered Gun Club, as well as a potential city traffic safety study on that. There may be some opportunities with Adams County serving as an umbrella in call 4, and having the city being able to participate on that. So with that, we're available for questions and conversation with the committee. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mac and Victor, for the presentation. Councilmember Murillo, I understand you have a hard stop in a minute here. Do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, but this is a lot of information, a lot of good information. I'll add, and thank you, Mac, for the elaboration and for all of your work, and same to you, Victor. I don't have any questions, but I support continuing this to figure out any additional funding or any other resources we can kind of move towards our way on any of these types of projects.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Murillo. Councilmember Coombs?
No questions, just very excited to see kind of all the different ways that we can put together some funding to address our various infrastructure needs, and really appreciate you kind of putting all of those things together into one conversation, because I know we've been having a lot of piecemeal conversations about these issues. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, I'll add, this really kind of helps, provide the, I think, proper context for just how much funding comes through Dr. Cog to our region, and both of the regional forums that we're a part of, and the benefits that we're going to be deriving as a city and as a region from that. So thank you for providing that information for us and for the public.
Welcome.
All right. So moving on to miscellaneous matters. I did have a miscellaneous matter that I mentioned to Deputy City Manager Perry and Cindy during our last council meeting around the traffic and safety issues on Havana between 4th and 6th. So I believe y'all have a quick update for us on what's going on there.
Yes, we do. And I think I'm going to let Carly take it away.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Cindy. So I have a couple years of history on this item, and so does CDOT. So I thought I'd just give a really quick recap and then let you know what we're trying to do moving forward. So the first time we received resident outreach on this was about 2 years ago, October 2020. And at that time, I think there was a one fence crash right on the corner. And the request was also to repair some of the object marker signs that were on that corner. So I reached out to CDOT. They've been honestly really great partners on this, and they've been working with us really well to look at this intersection. So they helped me do a pretty thorough crash review to see if there's any patterns that would be, correctable by engineering measures. And so CDOT immediately moved forward with a few different improvements as far as signing and striping at 4th and Havana. So they got those installed right away, I think in December 2020 is when they made a few different improvements. So they moved forward with that. We let the residents know that had contacted us about it. I think they were using Access Aurora at the time. So I spoke with a few different people in this area at the time. So then we received additional outreach as well. I think earlier this year, there was the more significant fence crash was in February on that same corner. So after that, we did receive a council request and again, worked very closely with CDOT to look at the crash history again, pull the crashes since some things did change since 2020 with traffic patterns and all that. So they did another deep dive with me on the crash data and they installed a few additional improvements. So they put another work order in for their staff, did additional signing and striping, improvements based on what we were seeing. And what we saw with the house on the corner was that vehicles occasionally use the right turn lane to kind of go straight and deliberately cut across and kind of cut off the queue of traffic. So we saw a couple crashes and driver behavior related to that. So we really tried to embellish to people that is a right turn lane and did a lot of different modifications to give advanced warning of that. So we made a couple changes. CDOT made a bunch of the changes. That was this last summer, so they did that in July of this year, and we received a request from Councilmember Medina that we responded to as well, and then we actually held a public meeting with all the residents in this area in June of this year. So June of 2020, some of the residents that you heard from on Monday were there, and so we had a virtual public meeting. CDOT attended as well. I was on the call and we walked through every single question that the residents had at that time pretty thoroughly during that meeting. I know we've received recent requests again. We're still looking at the area. We have a couple ideas between us and CDOT of some additional improvements that we think might be feasible that we're still looking into and looking to set up a meeting to go over that with Councilmember Medina as well. So that's kind of the overall overview of the issue.
Okay, thank you for that history. I think that helps. So I'm looking at the area now as we're talking on Google Maps, and I do see that the striping has been refreshed fairly recently. These photos I think were taken in May of this year. But I'm wondering with the pattern there and the misuse of that dedicated turn lane when you get into 4th, why not add a concrete, guide basically there, or something to just, a physical obstruction so that folks can't just, drive over the paint. I kind of see this very similarly to protected bike infrastructure, for example, versus just, striped infrastructure. If we want people to change their behavior, you have to actually change the built environment. So I'm going to guess that's something that y'all have already talked about, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're looking at. We're going to need to collect survey, and we've talked to CDOT about that as well as sort of a next step. So when we see these things come up, we try to do something as quickly as we can. And so typically signing and striping is kind of the quickest way we can get something out there. But I'll also say that there isn't a super high crash pattern. I know the crashes there have been are very impactful, specifically for the residents on the corner, but it's, you know, it's not that frequent that, you know, we would go up and put something huge right away. Like we start with our the things that we can get out there quickly and that are a little bit less expensive and all that. So that's what we've done a couple different times. And CDOT extended the channelizing lane. They've added markings. We've put additional signs. They put an additional like lane end sign. So the next thing we're thinking of is something physical there in the road to make it so that people can't kind of cut around. So
and I appreciate that the crash data there, you know, is not particularly high, which we can be thankful for. But I will say when it comes to having, you know, an area where vehicles impact property, I would rather us be proactive as opposed to wait for a significant pattern to emerge, you know, because I mean, and it's not just property here, but potentially lives as well. So just my 2 cents. And I know, you know, I'm a big believer in evidence-based policy and infrastructure improvements, but I just think that there's maybe a certain tolerance that we need to apply, or maybe have less of a tolerance rather when it comes to, you know, folks' lives being at risk due to a dangerous situation. But I do appreciate the update there. Sorry, go ahead, Carly.
I was just going to say we agree. We do try to be proactive with these things. I think the concern from CDOT and myself with putting something in the road right away is sometimes there's unintended consequences with, you know, people hitting that and swerving more or swerving to avoid things we put out there. So that's what we try to look at as well. But I think we are still looking at options for some sort of curbed solution. So we'll be working through that and happy to provide updates later on.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Councilmember
Yep.
Coombs, do you have any comments or questions?
I do not. Thank you for the update.
Yep. All right. Well, and thank you all for putting that together for us in a hurry. I really do appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. So any other miscellaneous matters? All right, seeing none. Anticipated topics for the next meeting?
So we have potentially a few IGAs that are going to be coming forward on, let's see, looks like a traffic item. We're also going to be, I don't know that we're going to have them for the next one. And then I don't believe we've typically had a meeting in December, but we're going to be putting the pedal to the metal on our call to apps that you just saw presented. We've got to get those IGAs going. So, you know, working with CDOT, it's doubtful that those will be quite ready for that. So those might be early next year before they are ready for prime time. It's also possible we may have again, pending time, the streets and snow update is kind of still out there. So we'll see how that falls as well.
All right. Thank you, Victor. And oh, just so y'all know, I did submit a council request earlier today. I had a constituent who had RTD-based concerns with regards to the light rail still being out of service, the R line. I know that that is not directly within our purview or really in our purview at all, but I did put in a council request that will be coming through y'all to reach out to your contacts at RTD. And I did also make an ask to see if we could arrange a briefing from RTD on the status of the investigation there, on the derailment, to see what, you know, they're thinking they might be able to do to get service back up and running, as well as to have them kind of walk us through how they are informing our residents of schedule changes and disruptions, because that was something that was really negatively impacting my constituent and his wife from the story he told me earlier today. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Councilmember Marcano, I'm not sure if
Yes,
you've
ma'am.
seen the Denver Post article that came out either, I believe, this morning. It does talk a little bit about the R line and Director Broom and his inquiries and kind of where they've taken that back into their executive sessions. So I believe that was yesterday, but Matt Callison probably knows way more than I do if he's still on. So just FYI.
No, I appreciate that, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, for that. Just, you know, for the committee's benefit, we have reached out to RTD a number of times and basically did not receive any more information or any different information than was presented on their website and as reflected, as Cindy said in the article as of this morning.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, I appreciate that.
But we will
Thank you.
definitely continue. And
Yeah, and that article's paywalled. Is there a way that we can get access to it? But,
oh, we got it. Right, Mac?
oh,
we will certainly work with our comm staff to dispatch that to you
all right. Thank you.
and the committee as well.
Right. Yes, please. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for that update and for bearing with me for a little addition there. So our next meeting, it doesn't have a date shown.
It's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so we gotta deal with that.
So we all have to interrupt our family time is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we definitely want to reschedule that. Looking at the calendar here, would the 30th be amenable to committee members and staff?
That's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
I have an 11 to 12 call, but other than that, I am open.
Okay. So could we do 1 o'clock on Wednesday?
I can do that.
Okay. Does that work for staff?
Yeah, Lynn, I just want to confirm the snow and ice control plan will likely be there, right?
Fingers crossed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing meetings, so yes, we
Gotcha.
will be there.
Okay. Yes, that would work.
Great. So let's get a calendar invite out for that. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you all so much. It's a packed one today. So have a great rest of your day and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.